Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So it was my first event at Warhammer World in Nottingham, the big HQ for Warhammer in the UK, and it was the Warhammer the Old World Throne of Skulls. And the purpose of this video is to go through my experience at the weekend, a brief overview of my games, but also to give my opinion on the event more broadly and the unique scoring system that they use at the event, and to what extent I think that will impact Warhammer the Old World in the future. So there are around 50 players at the event, although it did start out a lot higher than that. Good spread of factions, although no legacy lists of course, and you need Games Workshop models to enter the event, right? So it's strictly Games Workshop official rules. The format, and I suppose I'm a bit late to the party here because Throne of Skulls exists already with other game systems that I don't play, right? Like 40k and Age of Sigmar. But for those of you who don't know, the main difference is the scoring is only 1/3 gaming. So, to quote the wording from the pack, to become a Throne of Skulls champion, a player needs to be skilled in the arts of generalship, army theme and/or painting, and be able to ensure that they make the game enjoyable for both themselves and their opponent. So it's 2/3 voting system, and you're voting for your favourite games and your favourite army, and you have 2 votes for each, and you can only vote for the people that you played against. I'll speak at greater length towards the end of this video about my thoughts on the scoring, but essentially you've got 2 favourite game votes based on the most enjoyable games of the weekend. What makes an enjoyable game? Obviously that's very subjective. Being a likeable person, I suppose, who's not too gamey with the rules, but the list that you choose also might come into it as to the, affecting the overall experience that your opponent has. You've also got 2 favourite army votes, which is based on, the army that you played against, how cool you think the theme is, or how good the painting is. So not quite the same as the favourite game votes, but I expect for some people, I would be one of those people, that playing against a cool army makes for an enjoyable game. But it's all subjective, of course, so you've got those 4 votes, which you can give to any of your opponents, and you could give 2 votes to the same opponent, right? Because you could give them a favourite army vote and a favourite game vote, and each vote is worth the same as a win in gaming points, right? So if you get 5 votes, it's the equivalent of 5 extra wins. So it's 1/3 gaming, 1/3 sportsmanship in a way, and 1/3 painting. There was also a comp system in play at this event. So in addition to the normal rules for Warhammer the Old World, you've got a 500 point limit on any single character, which I think is good as a whole. It doesn't have a huge effect, but it mainly limits the Chaos Lord on Dragon and some of the Elf Lords on Dragon as well, which can be a bit oppressive when they clock in around the 600 point mark. You're only allowed 1 level 4 and up to 2 level 3s. So again, that's not affecting most people, but it's mainly affecting the kind of Night Goblin lists or the Tomb King lists, which like to run a double level 4. I actually took the opportunity to play around with the level 3 in my list actually, because I normally just run 1 level 4, but I decided to go for 2 wizards. So I've got an Orc Shaman level 3 and a Goblin Shaman level 4. Orc Shamans are pretty cool because they get +1 to cast anyway if they're in an Orc mob with a unit strength of 10. So both my Shamans will be casting as level 4s anyway. And there was no rule of 3, right? So you could take 4 of the same unit, which I also took advantage of because I got 4 Goblin Chariots in my core section. So the army is led by Rob, the Orc Warboss, on his trusty Wyvern. He's got the armour of Meteoric Iron, Talisman of Protection, and the Trollhide Trousers for that 5-up, 5-up, 5-up. I've dropped the Ogre Blade that I normally give him in exchange for a Great Weapon, so he's got more of a tanky build. Great Weapons are great though on the Warboss because he gets the use of the Chopper's Rule, so he's AP 3/4 on the charge. Udura is my big boss BSB, who's identical to the normal build that I give him, so he's got the Green Amulet, the Banner of Butchery on the banner, and a Potion of Speed, just in case that comes in useful. Adda is my Orc Weird Knob level 3 on Battle Magic with the Lore Familiar. He's also got 2 Power Scrolls to make sure he can get off his Oaken Shield when he needs to. The idea is to take Oaken Shield, Arcane Urgency and Hammerhand in every game, and I think I do that over the weekend. That way I can buff my boar unit with a 5-up ward, I can move the unit again, and I can do Hammer Hand in combat, right? Which makes him a great addition to the sort of Death Star build that I'm running. Oaken Shield and Hammer Hand can both be cast in combat, so I'm going to stick with those 3 spells. I've got Festus, the level 4 Goblin Oddnob. Again, similar build to I normally run with the Idol of Gork for that extra range and reroll to cast. Great when you need to get that itchy nuisance off, and that dragon is just 18 inches away and has some magic res. The Dispel Scroll now, instead of the normal power scrolls that I give him, his job is to stay out of combat and dispel, whereas my level 3 obviously gets stuck in. The boas, right, so 17 Orc Boar Boy Biggins with all the trimmings. As usual, I've got the Thinking Hat on the champion and the big red raggedy flag on the banner. And then I've got 9 chariots, right, 4 Goblin, 3 Orc, 1 with the Frenzy upgrade, and 2 Snotling. So the thinking with the Nomadic War functionally is the same as ever, so you rush forward and smash things up. The boars hit like a ton of bricks. I'm running them 10 wide. The Warboss and Wyvern supports them. They're the 2 hard-hitting units. And then there's loads of chariots to come in later. If the combat grinds on, then you can bring in those impact hits and hopefully swing things in your favour if your boars don't go through the first thing they hit. If the boars aren't charging, then hopefully something else is, right? Lots of units normally help me to drop my big unit and Wyvern last, because I can react to my opponent's deployment by just dropping, Snotling pump wagons and goblin chariots and stuff while they're dropping their main units. Countercharge on the boars means that they're not afraid of a monster or even another big bus of knights, as because I run them quite wide and they've got impact hits with the Nomadic War, they normally get a few attacks out, even if they're charged by a bunch of knights with even higher initiative than they do. Gone for more protection on the Wyvern, as I said, with the 3 saving throws, and more protection on the boars in the form of the Oaken Shield. I'm actually expecting some more kind of gunline armies now that this Empire Arcane Journal is out. Dwarves are always popular, of course, and I was actually wrong about that in terms of my expectations. There weren't that many gunlines. There were a couple of Expeditionary Force lists which I didn't come across. But I was sort of expecting to have to run through a few sort of hail of bullets to get to the other side of the board with my Nomadic War. But I was pleased with my more sort of defensive build anyway. Normally I have the Ogre Blade in the list, as I said before, and then I have a second War Boss as well to pump out loads of other attacks. So I've gone for a different build. It's still fast, it still hits hard, but there's a little bit more defense in there as well. So let's see how we get on over 5 games with the Nomadic War. So game 1 was against David's fluffy Bretonnians, and no Green Knight and no Peg Knights, so lovely friendly list to start the weekend. He also had old models on Goblin Green bases, right? So just like mine, so it made for a very enjoyable game. So we had a Duke on Hippogriff, Gromrel Greathelm with the 2-up rerolling 1s, Morning Star of Fracas, Virtue of Knightly Temper, and a Charm Shield. So Duke coming in at a whopping 479 points, just under the limit. 8 Grail Knights, which I don't often see also in the Brett list that I play against. Paladin BSB, and level 2 Damsel on Elementalism. 3 units of Knights of the Realm, one of them not in lance formation, as you can see on the right hand side there. 24 archers, plus the level 4 is with those archers on the hill on the right hand side, also on Elementalism, and a trebuchet. So the boars I've put down on the left, facing down his Grail Knights, and I think the boars can take them, as there aren't that many of them, along with his BSB. And his level 4 is on the other side of the table, so I should comfortably get off my ward save and my buffs. And that's how it goes down, right? So the first turn, I get the Evil Suns off, the Oaken Shield off, so the boars are nicely buffed, so it's time to get aggressive. And my plan initially was to use the Arcane Urgency to put them like right in front of his Grails, just inside countercharge range, and then use the Hand of Gork to put the Wyvern in front of the other unit of Knights, so the boars would deal with the Grails on their own. I go for the Arcane Urgency. His level 2 needs a double 6 to stop it, and then boom, there it is, double 6. And we kind of look at each other for a minute there. It's one of those moments, early on in the first game of the weekend where it's like, wow, there's the double 6, so no Arcane Urgency for you. And then I try and get off the hand of Gork, and he needs a double 6 on his Fated Dispel, and then boom, there it is again. Another double 6. And we just couldn't believe it. And I'm sort of picking up my jaw from the table here, thinking, well, there goes my best laid plans in the movement phase. I guess the charges will now be up to David to choose who he charges. I tried to sort of take that decision away from him, but it wasn't to be. Brett's turn 1 then. So in the end, nothing charges my War Boss on Wyvern, right? So I get the 2 Lances into the Boars, the Grails and the Realm Knights. The Boars countercharge. The other Knight units charge the Goblin Chariots, right? And eliminate them. The Duke comes out of his hidey hole on the left-hand side, ready to charge on turn 2. And we set up this big combat in the middle. Now, I'm unsure how this combat's going to go. I do have my ward save off, but I only countercharge 2 inches. So I forego the impact hits and the furious charge rules, which is a bit disappointing. But perhaps more importantly, I only get +2 to initiative, which means that even those Knights of the Realm are swinging before the Orcs. The Grail Knights would swing first anyway, because they've got high initiative. But normally I'd be swinging at the same time as those Knights of the Realm. I lose 4 Boars. So my saves are not bad, and I only kill like 1 Knight of the Realm in return, because David's saves are quite hot with the Bretts as well. So I'm looking like I'm going to lose this combat, but then the Hammer Hand spell comes in hot, and I get 6 hits, and I punch 4 Knights out cold with the Hammer Hand. So it's just swinging the combat in my favour, and the Knights give ground. So it was touch and go there. We fail our restraint test though, and the combat just rolls on to the next turn. So next round, neither of us will have our charge bonuses, and it's the Orc turn, but it's the Orc's turn next, right? So I do have a few tricks up my sleeve. Firstly, I can call a war with my War Boss and my Big Boss to make sure that I'm pumping up my combat res. And my War Boss can come into the flank of the Knights of the Realm. He would go into the Grail Knights, but obviously the BSB has blown his horn, so my Wyvern can't fly, but luckily he's pretty close to the other Knights, so he can charge in the flank there. The other Knights of the Realm units have taken the bait by killing the Goblin Chariots on the right hand side, and they're now exposed to counter charges from my Orc Chariots. I lose another couple of Boars in the combat, but the Grail Knights are beaten quite heavily now that they are outnumbered, and we chase the remaining Knights down. And the Duke now stands alone on that side of the table. In the centre, the 2 Chariots blow away that unit of Knights of the Realm, and the other frenzied Orc Chariot bounces off those Knights and loses combat. Brett's turn, the Duke, he gives it a good go against the Boars, but my static combat res is still up to about 4, and my ward save is still up, and the Orc Chariot is licking his lips for a charge on turn 3. I do lose 2 of my chariots to shooting, and the other chariot loses its last wound from those Knights on the right hand side. He's got archers on the hill, he's got magic missiles, he's got the trebuchet, so he's able to pick off my smaller units in the shooting phase. But my Wyvern has now turned his attention to that side of the board, and will be going for that catapult and that level 4 imminently. The Duke is brought down on the Orc turn, and the Boas turn around and use their Arcane Urgency on turn 4 to move across the board to mop up what's left of the heroic Bretonnians. So it's game 2, and I'm up against Scott's Wood Elves. Now, I know Scott quite well from the 8th edition circuit. This is actually our first game against each other in either edition. He's rocking a Glade Lord on Dragon with a 5-up, 5-up, and the popular Annoyance Resplendence combo for the -1 to hit in a challenge and the -1 weapon skill debuff. He's got a level 4 Spellweaver with Yoke and Stave on Elementalism, 2 units of Glade Guard, 3 units of Scout, so loads of poison shots, unit of Sisters, unit of Glade Riders, a Treeman, and an Eagle. Now, game 2 was Flank Attack, which didn't have a huge impact on the game. We both had a smattering of units on the left and right flanks, respectively, but Our main units were all in the middle anyway. The Wood Elf Scouts didn't get too close to me in deployment, so they sort of stayed in their own deployment zone pretty much. And everything sort of clustered around the woods as expected, although quite well spread out on the sort of backboard edge there. I've only played Wood Elves a couple of times with Nomadic War, and I'm yet to find a way through them, really. It's just very hard to get more than like 400 or 500 points or so, because you can catch the infantry, but the cavalry and the flyers are just too mobile to tie them down, and while my army is fast, it isn't quite mobile enough to catch the Elven Steeds with the reserve move, especially when there's lots of woods on the table. So turn 1, I survived that first kind of volley of arrows, and on my turn 1, I get very aggressive, so I get the Oaken Shield off, which will be the last time I get it off all game, because I'm quickly going to move into Oaken Stave range. In the centre, I charge down the Treeman and the Giant Eagle. On the right-hand side, I get some of my Goblin Chariots into the Scouts, or Glade Guard, whatever they are, milling around on the flank there. The Dragon avoids the path of my Boars and Wyvern, which I was half expecting. I thought he might fancy a duel with my General, but the Dragon is just, playing the avoidance game like the rest of the army, picking off lone chariots and stuff. From turn 2, I basically failed to get any more spells off, the Oaken Stave proving its worth there. And my first time playing it, actually, and like the puppet for Warriors of Chaos, it just sort of shuts down all of your spells. So having gone quite heavy on the magic in this army list, it's really a kick in the teeth. After winning combat on Wood Elf's turn 2 or 3, was it, I decided to reform the Boars into a line, as you can see in the picture. Mainly so my Shaman is like outside of dispel range, so he's like more towards the middle of the board when they all go in a line. And also to see if I can get this dragon, right? So I reform to face the dragon. If I can get the Here We Go spell off, that means that my chariot can declare a charge and get out of the way, allowing me to wheel into that dragon. And I also get the Itchy Nuisance off, right? And I drop its toughness to 4, so I've got a big opportunity here. The big charge comes in, but I made a mistake. I didn't realise I couldn't deny a challenge if I only have 1 rank, which was news to me, because it basically, in the book, it says you can't refuse a challenge if, and there's 2 bullet points, right? If you're not in a unit, or you're the last model in the unit, or you're surrounded on all 4 of your arcs. And of course, none of those bullet points apply. But I suppose the ruling comes from the requirement to move through the ranks, right? So obviously the character that declines the challenge has to move through the ranks. Now, I just assumed that, if you're only in 1 rank, you'll just move to a second rank, because it's only temporary, isn't it? You go back to your original formation, your original position in your original formation after the challenge is finished. So I didn't really think much of it. But anyway, my plan fails, and I don't get to kill the dragon. I was so looking forward to just a whole bunch of dice and strength 6 hits coming in and just finishing off that dragon with 1 big boar boy charge. But I do win combat, however, because the dragon sort of fluffs its overkill on my champion, and the dragon flees. However, because my line is so wide, I end up hitting a unit of Glade Guard, fleeing Glade Guard, before it can catch the fleeing dragon. And that ends up being a pivotal moment in the game, because the dragon then proceeds to rally and move out of the way and ends up finishing off my boar boys by the end of turn 6. So it was a frustrating moment there for me, because I thought, wow, I'm actually going to get the drop on these Wood Elves and finally get a win against Wood Elves, but it was not to be. How does one beat Wood Elves with Nomadic War, I wonder? I've got the MSU build, which typically you would think is good at getting through a sort of gun line, because they've got these small units of archers, and they can't shoot all my chariots, right? So some of them do get through and end up killing some of the infantry, but I've got to come up with some more shenanigans. I do want to try Goblin Heroes with ambush at some point, because in the Nomadic War you can give the Goblin Heroes ambush. I'm still not convinced though, with coming on turn 2 and then still not charging until turn 3. Could just go more Goblin Chariots, because you only need the light chariots really to kill Wood Elves, because the heavy chariots are slow, they don't really get there till turn 3 and 4 anyway, whereas the light chariots, they just charge turn 2, and that's all we really need to kill a small unit of elves with bows. So maybe more Goblin Chariots, we'll see. I think I was unlucky with the Wyvern. Oh, did I even mention what happened with the Wyvern? Yeah, so the Wyvern died to Pillar of Fire on turn 2. And it was annoying because I'd gone full defensive with the Wyvern, only for him to die in the same manner that he used to die back when I had him with the Ogre Blade and just a 4-up, 5-up. So I got unlucky, basically. He had 3 wounds left and Scott got 3 6s for the Pillar of Fire, and I just fluffed all my saves. It could have gone a different direction had the Wyvern been able to get into the back lines there, because obviously he can fly. He still can't catch the reserve moving Elven Steeds in one turn, but with the Wyvern knocking about behind the woods and then my Boar Boys in front of the woods, I think perhaps between them they would have had it covered in a way so that I can actually get to grips with that level 4. But yeah, ends up as a big win to the Wood Elves. Game 3 is versus Andrew's Heralds of Darkness. My first time coming across this build from the Arcane Journal. People have said it isn't very strong. I think those Chosen Chariots are strong, but anyway, there's none of them in sight. We've got a Nurgle Dragonlord clocking in at 496 points with a Lance. There's an Exalted Champion of Khorne on Demonic Mount with Biting Blade and Enchanting Aura. There's 3 units of Knights. There's 8 Knights of Khorne, 8 Knights with the Banner of Rage, and another 8 Chosen Knights of Nurgle. And there's 6 Marauder Horsemen and 3 Dragon Ogres. Now, Game 3 was meeting engagement, so you have to bear with me here because I'm going to give a kind of mini rant. Because look, I mean, this is obviously not a purely competitive tournament, and therefore, no one's going to make a fuss about it. But the randomness of deployment in this scenario, in my opinion, makes it unsuitable for matched play, right? So, obviously, I roll a 1 for my Boar Boys, and I guess it's my fault for making an army where the whole army is sort of based around one unit, or at least the centerpiece of the army where your characters go, which is quite common in a lot of armies. But, everything else is a support unit for that main unit, right? So when it doesn't come on until turn 2, that is a pretty big blow, and that changes the whole game. To the point where, in a friendly game, if that happened to my opponent in a friendly game, I wouldn't inflict it on them. I would just say, look, just re-roll it or we'll do something different, right? Because especially when you've got your characters who do come on, and so they're waiting for the unit to come on, sort of just milling around in the corner of the board somewhere, so that their unit comes on and then they can join their unit in turn 2, right? So, I mean, obviously this scenario exists in previous editions. I mean, in 8th edition, we used to say that you roll once for your characters, for your unit and the characters, so at least they can come on as one. Now, it's not that your characters are really in danger, hiding behind a rock at the back of the board. It's just that your opponent knows where your big unit's going to come on, then, don't they? Because it's going to come on near your characters, right? So it just sort of, it's such a big disadvantage when you roll a 1 for one of your main units that it kind of ruins the game a bit. Another way you could do it is that you could have a series of dice rolls. So if it's rolling a 1, you've got 10 units, you roll 10 dice, however many 1s you get, that's how many units are delayed, but that you get to choose those units, right? So that makes it more like the flank attack, where there's a tactical element involved where you're choosing which units are going to come on as reinforcements, rather than just having it completely random, where, on a roll of a 1, your dragon doesn't turn up until turn 2, or at least have them come on at turn 1 rather than it's too penalising, basically, if you roll a 1. Anyway, rant over. So Andrew rolled a 1 as well, actually, for one of his units. So his Chosen Knights didn't come on. But at least he has, as you can see in the pictures, what looks like an army deployed at the start of the game, whereas all I have is a Wyvern and some Chariots. I wasn't complaining at the time, though, and I managed to bait his 2 frenzied units into my pump wagons on turn 1 and then countercharge them with some Chariots. It wasn't enough to break either of those units, but I certainly did some damage simply by taking advantage of his frenzied units there. My War Boss has a duel with these 3 Dragon Ogres on the right-hand side, and there's no other units sort of interfering in that fight. It's just my war boss versus 3 Dragon Ogres. So he managed to win combat, force them back, win combat again, pursue them off the backboard edge on turn 2. My boars eventually come on, and then they've just got a Dragon Lord in their face as soon as they come on the board. They survived well on the back of the board, actually, so they lose combat twice, and they're right on the back of the board. And then my war boss is able to come back on, fly up, and then charge into his unit of knights with his exalted champion in it, beat them in combat, force them back, and then get a cascading combat into his lord. And we end up winning combat against the lord. We don't catch him, so he gets away, and then rallies, and the fight continues, and eventually the war boss dies to the dragon, and that's kind of where things are finished. So I managed to salvage something out of the game. It finishes around a sort of 300-point difference, so a narrow win to the Chaos. Shame about the mission, really, as it was kind of two, the Heralds of Darkness and the Nomadic War are the two kind of all-mounted armies. It could have made for quite an interesting game with lots of, fast units looking for the charge, potential for some interesting movement phases to position well for the next round of charging, but alas, it was not to be. So game 4 is against Robin's Warriors of Chaos. And it's Warriors again. There's a Nurgle Lord on Manticore, 2 Favours of the Gods, Crown of Everlasting Conquest for the extra 5 up, Brazen Collar for the magic res, Enchanting Aura and Biting Blade again. Sorcerer Lord level 4 on Tzeentch on a Chaos Chariot, another 2 Favours, Spell Familiar and the Puppet on Battle Magic. 3 units of 5 Knights. Unit of 5 Hounds, 3 Dragon Ogres, and a Warp Fire Dragon. So very similar to most Chaos lists you see nowadays with the Mounted Core, Dragon Ogres and Monsters, and the tooled up Lord. Robin has a lovely painted army. I should have got some more close-ups actually, but check out his Lord on Manticore there with the Flaming Blade. Game 4 is Command and Control. So we've got this big impassable terrain in the centre, which would sort of divide the battlefield in two, really, particularly with our armies, as we both want to come forward and get into close combat quickly. There's 2 units of knights on the left, the Sorcerer quite central with the Warpfire Dragon, my Wyvern central as well, and the Knights and Lord and Dragon Ogres on the right, facing down my boars. Now, as usual, my chariots are just all over the place, but my rough plan was to use the deployment of the Sorcerer Lord to my advantage, given the terrain, try and take out some of those lines of sight. And I'm also planning on going straight for his monsters, right? So we'll see if they want to all fire me at once, or if they'll hang back. In my experience playing this Warpfire Dragon, Chaos players tend to play a bit gingerly with the Warpfire Dragon, which baffles me every time, but obviously it has this shooting attack. I think combined with the magic missiles from the Sorcerer Lord, it's tempting to use it as part of your artillery battery. The Lord on Manticore, however, is definitely not shy and flies right in front of my boars, exuberantly, as you can see in the picture there. I'm not in range for the Itchy Nuisance, but I get off all the other buffs. I get off Here We Go, Evil Suns, Oaken Shield on the boars, and we charge with the Wyvern as well into the Lord, right? Now, he's got 3 saves, but I've got so many Strength 6 attacks, Strength 7 on the War Boss, of course, that I sneak through a few wounds, and I only lose a couple of boards in the process. He's on double ones and breaks. Now, I remember now thinking, all right, now, do I let this guy get away, or do I try and chase? Because the Wyvern could choose to fly and then chase him over the top, or could just pursue on foot and go into the knights behind. So in the end, I choose just to pursue on foot. He wouldn't have caught the Lord anyway because I didn't roll high enough, so it ends up being the right decision. And now my Wyvern can protect the flank of my boars from this dragon in the middle of the table. And it works perfectly, as on the Chaos turn, the Warpfire Dragon swings into the Wyvern, who's obviously tough to 6 and triple save, but he's still in the same combat as the boars, who are, wailing on these Dragon Ogres and Knights. And in the end, everything breaks, and the Wyvern is able to chase down the dragon, and the boars slay the Dragon Ogres. One of the Knights gets away, but it's been a kind of obliteration of that right-hand flank, and it's looking ominous now as my Wyvern is bearing down on the Sorcerer Lord, my Boars are bearing down on his Chaos Lord, and I've left that left flank free pretty much because I've just hang back with my Goblin chariots and stuff, and I've let those Chaos Knights come up, happy to sort of sacrifice a couple of chariots just to keep them busy for a couple of turns. So it finishes a big win to the Orcs as we force the Lord off the table, and Rob with his big greatsword swoops down onto this Sorcerer on Chariot, and it's all over. Sunday lunchtime there was a favourite army competition, separate from the favourite army votes that we're doing against our opponents over the weekend. It wasn't an open competition, which surprised me actually. Maybe I didn't read the pack properly, but the organisers basically just tapped 7 people on the shoulder privately and invited them to display their armies in the glass cabinets. And we vote for our favourite 2 armies from those 7 armies using the QR code. So it was well organised and great to have the armies underneath the spotlights in the cabinets. Even if I did kind of miss walking around all the tables and looking at the armies on the battlefields, it was cool to just have them under the lights and you can really look at them in detail. And there were some stunning armies there, as you can see in the pictures. I was a little bit disappointed I couldn't enter the competition though. While my painting is by no means the best, it isn't just a painting competition, right? It's a favourite army competition, and I do have quite a unique looking army with, quirky models that no one else has, and, converted chariots and handmade banners and stuff like that. So I do think I could have picked up quite a few votes just based on the overall theme of my army, had I been able to enter the competition. There could have been a bit of a bias. I've got no evidence of this, of course, but because Games Workshop doesn't actually sell any of my models anymore, perhaps they don't want those models in the cabinet at Warhammer World, which could be a reason, but again, maybe I'm just sounding like sour grapes now. Maybe just my painting wasn't up to scratch. There is actually one cabinet in the museum which has some old 90s and 80s models in it, sort of at the beginning of the museum before you go into the main areas. There's like a small cabinet there which has some retro models in. One of the chaps running it came up to me actually and said he really liked my army and reminded him of the good old days, so I know at least one of them did like the army. Game 5 was against Max's Beastmen, and this was one of the armies that was from the display cases, right? So I'd actually just voted for this army as one of my 2 favourites. Lovely painted army. He's got a level 4 on Elementalism on Razorgore Chariot with Hagtree Fetish, Wargore BSB on foot with a great weapon in a unit of 23 Gore, and then just loads of units, right? So he's got 2 Tuskgore Chariots, 3 units of Razorgore, single units of Razorgore, 3 single Dragon Ogre Shartax, a Jabberslide, a Gorgon, a Shaggoth. So just lots of models being put down, and it looks like quite a fun army to run, and a fun army to play against as well, because it's not maxed out on characters, and he's got lots of funky units and monsters. Coming into this game, the last game of the tournament, it was a good way to finish things off, because it was like we both got 2 armies that are going to come at each other quickly, clash in the middle of the table, and we don't have to think too hard about all of the tactics. I ended up getting first turn, which I didn't really want in this game, because it's sort of the game which I prefer to sort of see how he approaches it before I commit. But I end up just moving forward pretty aggressively with everything, although I stay outside of the charge range of most of his Dragon Ogres and Chariots. Unless his Jabberslide wants to come in by itself, he's probably not going to charge me on his turn 1. And then when he does come in, he moves up his Shaggoth and Shartax sort of in a line in front of my Boars. They are 2 inches away, so I wouldn't get my Furious Charge if I go in. But I do get my Evil Sun shining off, and I still think that I win that quite comfortably on the charge, purely because of the weight of attacks coming in at strength 6. I should be able to swing things in my favour. I'm able to get some Goblin Chariots into his Centaur on the right hand side, and I'm able to keep his monsters busy with other chariots as his Gorgon and Jabberslide go past my Boars, and are trying to mop up my smaller units there on the flanks. And then my Wyvern gets a crucial charge into his level 4. Now, the guy's quite tough on the chariot there, but if he's in combat, he's not casting spells, and so the Wyvern spends most of the game dueling with the level 4, while my boars are able to turn around and finish off the Gore and the Shaggoth and stuff. And it ends up, my boars are sort of untouched in the middle of the table there and getting free reign on what they can charge, and so things gradually go my way, and it ends up quite a big win for the Orcs. So all in all, Games Workshop did a great job with the event as a whole. All of the organisation and information provided to us was fine. There was great food, the gaming tables and terrain were on point. All in all, fantastically run. Not much I can criticise at all, actually. I think the 8 p.m. finish on the Saturday was a little bit late, but because we got 3 hours for each game and a leisurely start on the Saturday morning, it was always going to finish a little bit late. And the meeting engagement, but I've already had my rant on that. Did the comp affect the list building? Hard to say, as the whole sort of scoring of the event is different. So probably the scoring element of things is going to have a greater impact on people's lists than the actual comp. Didn't see any of the sort of Night Goblin 9 fanatic lists. There were no sort of nasty mortuary cult lists with huge blobs of Boshabti. No Linehammer dwarfs. If it was a normal event scored primarily on gaming, just with the restrictions on dragons and level 4s, would that have made a difference by itself? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I do think the comp that they played with is good. A 500 point limit on characters. Now, obviously I'm speaking as someone who plays dwarves and orcs and goblins, so I don't actually have access to a 500 point character anyway. So it doesn't affect my armies at all. But there didn't seem to be many sort of big complaints there, and people still took, a Chaos Lord on a dragon. I mean, a Chaos Lord on a dragon is still very good at 500 points anyway, even if he doesn't have all of his toys. The 2 level 4s restriction, or no 2 level 4s restriction, was very good actually. I think that there needs to be some limit on the spell spam, and being able to have 2 level 3s or a level 4 and a level 3, I think is a reasonable restriction that doesn't quite go far enough, but it doesn't sort of make anyone feel bad that they can't still take the type of army that they want to take. So was there a different type of player at this event? I guess there is an element of truth to that, in that people are looking for a kind of softer experience than a regular, competitive GT. Perhaps people who are more of a hobbyist and don't play matched play very often, and therefore, want to focus on their painting and stuff, and then bring their army out for a softer experience. All in all, though, I would say I'm now one of the converted, with regard to having a larger emphasis on painting and sportsmanship. While I think that 1/3 for gaming is a bit low, I definitely liked the feel of an event where the gaming wasn't just the dominant thing there, and an environment where you can be rewarded for the quality of your painting, the originality of the collecting and modelling, and your desire to make a list and playstyle that is fun for your opponent, right? Or avoid the playstyles that are not fun for your opponent. It made for a friendly atmosphere and some really fun games. Games played to win, just as tactical and hard fought, but with a slight edge taken off. So I just wanted to analyse this concept of favourite game votes and favourite army votes just a little bit. People play Warhammer in different ways, right? And some play more competitive, and then for those players, and I think I'm one of them, a lot of the enjoyment comes out of solving the puzzle, right? Of how to overcome your opponent's army with the limited resources that you have. And, even if there are some kind of unintuitive things that happen in the game, or even if, the armies don't look and feel like proper armies, the enjoyment is coming out of the puzzle, right? And well, at least that's how I describe it, where you've got your opponent's army, you've got your army, and you're thinking, how can I overcome this army? Others play more narratively, right? And then the look and feel is more important. The enjoyment comes out of telling the story, rolling the dice to see how that story unfolds. So generally, you've got to kind of figure out who your opponent's going to be. You know, if you know who your opponent's going to be and you know what they want out of the game, then you can both just agree to play Warhammer in the way that you guys agreed to play it, right? But obviously at an event, you don't know who your opponent's going to be. And so you've got to have some kind of framework that people agree to, where we're going to play it with this amount of competitiveness or this amount of narrativeness, right? And so do you go into it thinking, I'm trying to get as many favourite game votes and favourite army votes as possible? I don't think you can blame people for trying to sort of play the system in a way and say, well, look, in a sense, popularity, being popular, being liked, is going to get me more votes and I'm going to do better in the tournament, right? Now, personality, I think, is a part of it, right? Because if you've got favourite game votes, being friendly, you know, buying beers all day is gonna mean that people like you a bit better, and you're more likely to get those votes. Now, obviously, you can pretend to be someone you're not, but over a 3-hour game with someone, you're going to get a flavour of who they are. And I think it's just, you know, the ability to have a laugh, isn't it? To have an enjoyable game. And obviously, when the luck turns against you, which it will do at some point in the game, then, you know, you see it that way and you take it in your stride and you have a good time. The list, I think, comes into it, right? So in not having too strong of a list, we all know who the culprits are, right? Your Double Dragon, your 360 Flying Circus Bretonnians, Linehammer Dwarfs, Avoidance Wood Elves. Lists, you know, designed to frustrate and preserve points, right? Like the Avoidance Wood Elves or the Gunline Dwarfs are probably the least fun to play into. Your Double Dragon might be quite fun to play into for some armies if you've got a way of dealing with it, right? Typically, and gunlines as well, right? It kind of depends on the opponent. Sometimes a close combat army versus a shooty army can be quite fun, provided that the general of the close combat army is going into it knowing the challenge ahead, knowing that they're going to lose models in the early stages of the game, but that they can still win in the later turns of the game, despite losing a lot of their army in the initial turns of the game. If they go into it with that philosophy, then they can still have a very enjoyable game, even though it's a bit frustrating initially. But ideally, games where both players are taking models off the table and it's unclear who will win until the later game makes for the best games, right? And I would also add nicely painted armies. Themed armies, right? And obviously, in this event, the favourite armies votes were different to the favourite game votes, but I would say that playing against a nice army enhances your game, right? And so there is an overlap here between your favourite game and favourite army votes. I'd say the quality of the painting and hobby, you know, if you can see that there's a themed army there that your opponent has spent a long time on, is giving it a lot of TLC, that's going to enhance my enjoyment of the game. And even allows me to forgive a lot of the cheesiness, right? So if there's a cheesy list, but I can see, look, they've actually spent a lot of time on these models. They haven't just like 3D printed it and contrast painted it and whacked it on the table and look, you know, here's my 3 dragons or whatever it is. There was a 3 triple dragon list at the event that did get quite a few votes for best army. I was keen to see. I looked actually on the scoring after the event to see if this army was a hated army or what. But and I didn't really get to chat to the guy, but he got a few votes for favourite army and favourite game. So, you know, people played against his triple dragon list and they enjoyed the game, which is great. So, you know, and I'm slightly guilty of this myself with my Linehammer Dwarf list right now. I haven't just, you know, put together a line of dwarfs in 5 minutes and spray painted them, right? I have actually spent a lot of time painting every individual ranger in my line. So I hope that people will, you know, enjoy the spectacle of the line of dwarves, even if it's not the most enjoyable army to play against, and forgive the cheesiness, as I said before. But all in all, I'd say I'm definitely one of the converted now, in that I think that having a larger emphasis on making it enjoyable for your opponent, and also being rewarded for your painting, collecting, and modelling, is the type of Warhammer that I want to play. I'm someone who spends a lot of time painting my models, so you could say, I would like that to have some more points available, some more tournament points available for the hobby side of things, because I spend a lot of time hobbying. I think that's important to me, and it's great to be in that environment where it was important to the other people around me as well. So overall, I came 10th. Huge thanks to my opponents, especially if you voted for me for favourite game or favourite army. I got best in faction for the Greenskins, right? So fellow Greenskins players, I hope I did you proud. Another trophy to add to the cabinet. The trophies are really nice altogether, really well run tournament. So I definitely recommend, if you're umming and ahhing about a tournament of Warhammer World, you should definitely go for it. It's very well run, great bunch of guys as usual, and fun was had by all. So thanks guys, if you've listened to this far, like and subscribe as usual, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye.